Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer at Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School. And it's wonderful to have you all join us this morning. AI and machine learning offer many fascinating capabilities, some far beyond human capacities. AI-powered systems can analyze real-time data from sensors, cameras, and other sources to make really quick and informed decisions. It can also help nudge us towards making better decisions and perhaps putting drafts together to write scripts and other things. But will we let it? And if so, when? As artificial intelligence and machine learning tools have become pervasive in business applications, so too have the interactions between AI and humans. Our upcoming design thinking course, for example, now includes where and when you might use AI tools to usefully speed up and enhance your ability to innovate. A growing area of research is focused on this area of human decision and task delegation to AI assistance, as well as on the phenomenon of algorithm aversion. That is humans' resistance to assistance from algorithm-based decision tools. That was actually something that I found myself falling in that category too just a couple of days ago. This is a potential barrier for adopting AI applications in business processes. So today we're exploring humans' use of AI assistance and the role of loss aversion. And we're doing this with Jessie Bockstedt, who's Senior Associate Dean for Graduate Programs and a Professor of Information Systems and Operations at Goizueta Business School at Emory University. Jessie studies user behavior and economic issues in the context of information technology, internet business models, and AI machine learning. And his research has appeared in many leading academic journals. And when I saw the list of them, Jessie, I hadn't read any of them. As with many Goizueta faculty, while Jessie has a foot firmly planted in rigorous academic research, he's also closely connected to business and the practice of business, and is an active member of Atlanta Technology Angels, which is an angel investing group that focuses on early stage funding and advising of tech-based startups in the Southeast. He currently teaches data visualization and AI machine learning for our BBAs, MBAs, MSBAs, and also executives. And he's going to be teaching the AI and machine learning for business course later this month, which I don't know if you know, Jessie, but I'm actually going to do it. So I'm going to give a plug for this because I want some of the Business Over Breakfast participants to either be physically sitting alongside me in the course in our global classroom, or for those that aren't physically in Atlanta, you can also learn alongside me because we're using our global classroom. So you don't have to get on a plane, you don't have to get in the car. You can learn alongside me as we do our AI and machine learning for business. And the evaluations for that course have been fabulous in the past, so looking forward to it. As usual, Jessie's going to spend the first 35 minutes or so sharing his insights and perspectives, followed by open Q&A. Please put your questions in either the chat or the Q&A. We'll get to some of them along the way, and we've reserved time at the end to answer as many of them as possible. You're also welcome to post comments in the chat, and I know you all do that, so thank you. Jessie, thank you for sharing your time and your insights this morning, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about my loss aversion to AI.
Thank you, Nicola. I appreciate the nice introduction, and thank you everybody for spending your time with me this morning. I know you all have very busy lives and very important jobs and lots of things to do, and so taking an hour of your day to hear me talk about my research is very humbling, and I appreciate you all being here this morning. As Nicola mentioned, we're going to talk this morning about AI generally and generative AI a little bit, but we're focused a little bit more on a study I've done recently, and we're actually doing a follow-up study at the moment, looking at how people choose to use AI assistance in certain types of tasks. And there's been kind of a historical aversion to using AI to help in certain types of tasks. And we propose kind of a simple method to try to overcome that. So I'm going to spend most of this morning talking about a study related to that, but I'll set up some of the kind of prologue to that about where we are currently with AI and generative AI. And as we're going through this morning, please, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them as we go along. I don't mind taking questions as we go along. And even if you have questions related to more general things about generative AI that aren't specifically related to the exact things we're talking about in the study, I'm happy to talk about that stuff too, because I know it's a very, very important topic right now that most businesses are grappling with. So the study we're going to talk about is called Overcoming Algorithm Aversion in Human AI Collaboration. And we'll get into that. A little bit about me. Nicola already gave a really great intro, so most of this is redundant, but I am a professor here in ISOM, our Information Systems and Operations Management Group. If you're not familiar with the business school here at Emory, that's basically where we have reformed computer scientists, math nerds, and economists that are now all business professors. So I fall more on the tech side of things, and have spent most of my career studying, as Nicola said, human-related issues to the use of technology in business and in kind of personal applications. I've been at Goizueta. This is my 8th year, 16th year as a professor. Previously was at University of Arizona and George Mason University. And as Nicola mentioned, I'm currently serving as the Senior Associate Dean of our graduate programs, which means I'm overseeing our MBA program, our MSBA program, our Masters of Analytical Finance program, our Executive MBA program, and evening MBA program. So I've got a lot of administrative stuff going on right now. I do teach classes on AI, machine learning, and data visualization, although that is being minimized a little bit right now because of my my current administrative roles. But I am doing a bit of teaching in the kind of executive education space, as Nicola mentioned. I do have a career prior to academia. I worked for, it was Anderson Consulting when I was there. So that dates me for, if you remember back before Anderson Consulting became Accenture in the late 90s, in management consulting research, management consulting practice, focusing on tech companies and telecommunications companies. And it was a fun time because it was kind of the start of the .com transition for businesses. I mentioned that not to just talk about myself, but I think the experience there is actually really relevant because I feel like we're going through a very similar revolution right now in business. In the late 90s, early 2000s, the internet had been around for a long time. There had been kind of a Cambrian explosion of business models and companies that were creating new things with the internet. But it really hadn't permeated the typical business environment where your typical Fortune 500 companies were using internet technology to become better at what they do, become more efficient, and serve their customers better. And during the late 90s, 2000, that's when that transition really happened. And I was part of that with a lot of the work I did at Accenture. And I feel like we're kind of at a similar stage right now. AI has been around for a long time. There's been some big advances in the last few years, and we're at this stage now where businesses are racing to try to figure out how to incorporate this new technology into their business processes, their applications, their products, and things in order to better serve their customers and find efficiency. So it's a very similar type of environment. And as Nicola said, I also am involved in kind of investing in tech startups here in Atlanta. I'm on the board of directors of the Atlanta Technology Angels, which is a really fun organization to be in. And I just mentioned that too because so many of the startups that we see right now have some sort of AI angle. So it's really kind of a fun time to be talking about this stuff. All right. I do want to also note that this study is done with my co-author Joseph Buckman, who's a professor of information systems at Georgia State. Joey and I have known each other for a long time. He was actually my PhD student at the University of Arizona, over a decade ago, and now he's a professor at Georgia State. So this is a co-work with him. All right, so let's set the stage a little bit for why we're talking about this. I think everybody, I don't need to motivate anybody on why AI is important and why we think about how humans interact with AI. I think that's front of mind for almost everyone. But there are some really interesting things that have come out in the last few months, some statistics that I think kind of drive us to think about this interaction between AI and human in terms of kind of collaborating for work in a little bit more detail. IBM recently released a report called "Augmented Work and Automated AI and for an sorry, excuse me, Augmented Work for an Automated AI-Driven World." And this was a good report that combined statistics from several different surveys they conduct. If you are familiar, the IBM conducts their global skills survey on a regular basis. This is something that's been going on for a long time, but they combine that data with a bunch of other data sources to kind of see, what's changing in terms of kind of business skills and needs from the workforce in relative to kind of this AI-driven world we're entering. And this is a really interesting. I think this is the most interesting thing that I saw in this report. If you compare 2016 to 2023. This is what we call bump chart and data visualization. It shows kind of the rankings of certain types of skills and how that's changed over time. And one that's really interesting is time management skills and the ability to prioritize has always been important, but it's gone from being kind of in the middle of the pack to number one in the last 7 to 8 years. And very interestingly is that STEM proficiency has dropped significantly. This was the number one thing that most businesses said that they needed their workforce to have in order to be successful, and that has dropped significantly. And this is not a coincidence. It's not a fluke. I think this is largely driven by the fact that we are starting to see these new tools emerge, these AI-driven tools that can really help people do more than they did in the past, potentially replace expertise that we might have needed in the past. And companies are starting to recognize that maybe we don't need everybody to be STEM focused people anymore in order to be successful. We need people to understand STEM, but also have the ability to use time management, prioritize, and use new tools like AI in order to help them be efficient, be productive, and accomplish some of the things we might have done before with more STEM knowledge. So this I thought was a very interesting statistic. Another thing I think was interesting too, this is from a report from McKinsey, a great report. I highly recommend taking a look at both of these. McKinsey has the state of AI. They had one in 2022, and then they have the state of AI in 2023. Honestly, it's kind of, I kind of wish it wasn't in 2023. Really, these should be in March of 2023 because things are changing so quickly in AI that trying to summarize the entire year what's going on is really kind of a fool's errand. But there's a lot of really interesting data and statistics in this report as well. Expectations about the impact of AI adoption on organizations' workforce in the next 3 years. And some interesting stuff. These are percentage of respondents, and they interviewed several different companies, large cohort, and you can see down here an N of about 900, almost 1,000 companies. Change in the number of employees. They do see about 25% in up to almost 40%, 45% expect to see some downsizing of the number of employees related to AI adoption. So there is an expectation that the workforce may shrink a little bit. Share of employees expected to be reskilled. I think this is more interesting than this number about loss of employees. Pretty much across the board, there's an expectation that there will be a large need for reskilling of employees as we start to learn how to use these AI tools and adopt them to increase productivity at companies. So this is, again, a survey of 1,000 companies. Another couple statistics I think are interesting to set kind of the stage here. This is also from that IBM report. Which organization level will job roles most be impacted by generative AI in 2025? And I think traditionally people think of AI as automating very simple tasks and replacing kind of entry level jobs. But some of these tools we're using now, like ChatGPT and other tools that are similar, we're starting to see it has the ability to do things that we normally would think that only white collar professionals could do, or management professionals or executives could do. And so this gives you an idea of kind of the expectation, at least from the business world, of what type of impact these tools will have based on level of position. And of course, big potential for job roles being impacted at the entry level. But we also see at the experience level, management level, and even up to the executive senior management level, we expect to have, not an insignificant amount of impact based on generative AI tools. So this stuff is here. It's not going anywhere, and it is going to change the way we work and change the way we are productive in our organizations. This is a quote from this report, but I've heard this many times from many different people in slightly different flavors, but it all is basically the same. And I love this quote. AI is not going to replace people, but people who use AI will replace people who don't. And I think that's the real message to kind of take home, just generally about what we expect this kind of transformation to do. There will be new products and new services and new innovations using these types of tools. There'll be new startups and new companies, and companies will offer new things. But I think the big transition we're going to see is that we're going to start to see people and employees using these types of tools to augment the way they work. And we will see lots of change in the way that work is done around using these tools. And employees and companies that are able to embrace these tools in order to become more productive ultimately are going to win this kind of battle over AI. Those that are hesitant to do that may get left behind. And to draw a parallel to what I was talking about before, this is very similar to the late 90s, early 2000s in the internet era, where companies that were late to digitally transform, late to think about having an online presence, late to adopt Web 2.0, a lot of those companies tended to have some problems catching up. And so we want to kind of keep these things forefront. Now, that doesn't say you should dive in and start investing millions of dollars into generative AI immediately, but you should be aware of what's going on and keep an eye on this and have an open mind about how these types of things may impact and drive productivity in your organizations. So AI and human collaboration, we know these AI is here. How are companies using it? What types of applications are there? There are a ton of different applications that have been in place for a long time, and then there's a whole bunch of new emerging things that we're seeing. And generally, AI is a predictive tool that is used to help in tasks that can be kind of casted as prediction tasks, and that has expanded dramatically to think about what we can do with prediction. And things like ChatGPT and similar type of large language models really kind of open our eyes on how we can have some sort of an agent to help us and help collaborate with humans. So here's just a funny cartoon. I'm trying to create an AI that can understand and use sarcasm. How's it going? And the AI responds, "It's going great. This guy is a real genius." And the people, I don't know if that's being sarcastic or not, which is kind of funny. Robotics, we're starting to see use of AI-driven robotics in factories and manufacturing environments and production environments. So that's another example of AI-human collaboration. AI-human collaboration in medicine, both in terms of diagnosis and providing decision aids to help doctors make better decisions about what might be ailing a patient, or better treatment regimens. But also robotic usage and AI-driven robotics in surgery. I've actually seen billboards around Atlanta recently for robot-assisted surgery as something that they're trying to advertise to potential patients. Robo-advising, huge boom in AI-driven investment advisors at financial services companies in the last few years, and this is exploding even more now with the use of these large language models. You might remember the Lobot from a few years back, where Lowe's had a robot that would walk people around and help them find things in stores. So AI human collaboration isn't just about employee AI collaboration. It can also be about collaboration with AI and your customers. And we're seeing an explosion in chatbots and things like that to help customers do self-service driven by AI. And even in something you might not think of as a very AI tech focused arena, but even in law, there's a huge boom in creating AI driven tools to help lawyers be more productive, to do things from like assess a large corpus of documents, to help prepare briefs, to help analyze contracts. Lots of interesting stuff there. So this idea of AI human collaboration is really everywhere. And just to give kind of a real concrete example that is kind of may kind of surprise you if you're not in this space and following these large language models closely, which are changing very quickly, the innovation there. One of the big things that these companies that are building these models are focusing on now is code generation and code creation. And what would have been, just 2 years ago, one of the jobs you would always advise your kid to go study for in college is become a software engineer. It's the high paying, bulletproof job that if you can do that, you'll be set for life. Well, now people are starting to rethink that because tools like GPT-4, which is the back end of ChatGPT, the newest version of ChatGPT, can write code. And there are other tools like Llama and others that can write code pretty well too. And we're starting to see that we're able to use these tools to write code almost as good as humans. So this is AlphaMind, which is a Google product. And this is an example of it writing some code and showing its performance. And it's been increasing dramatically over time here. And this is actually from a few months back, so I'm sure it's doing a lot better now. But it's performing at how an average human would perform in, there's these competitive coding tests where you can do online and you can do coding problems and compare them and see how well you perform. So it's starting to perform at the level of humans. And so just another example. So what does this all stuff point to? I'm not trying to say that in the next 5 years, all of a sudden AI is going to do all of our jobs. But what I think will happen is that we will have AI co-pilots that are helping us in a large majority of the jobs that we do. I currently use ChatGPT, not on a daily basis, but probably on a weekly basis to help me with just administrative stuff. Like if I have to put together a proposal for the education committee, I may feed a few documents into ChatGPT and have it write a rough draft of a proposal, and then I'll go through and edit it and clean it up and make sure it makes sense. And it saves me some time to do that, right? Yes, shout out to Microsoft Copilot for sure. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about AI delegation and some of the, so that's kind of the prologue. Let's talk about some of the kind of research in this area and then talk about what we actually did in the study. So AI assistance, this idea of delegating to AI and delegating to algorithmic decision aids. If you really think about what AI is generally, AI, we use this term, primarily today, people kind of use it to talk about these generative models, but really AI is a bigger term that means any kind of computational technique that can help humans, that can perform cognitive tasks that a human might normally do. And so this idea of using kind of algorithm-driven decision aids has been around for a long time. And there's been a lot of research on using these things and AI delegation. And oftentimes AI assistants can outperform human workers. That was kind of big news 10 years ago. Now that's kind of, okay, yeah, I can see how this stuff is doing. It can do a better job than a human might. For example, in image classification, if you show someone a picture of an image, there are AI tools now that I can identify things in an image just as well, if not better than an average human would. So outperforming humans is becoming, I wouldn't say it's the standard, but it is becoming more common. AI assistants can also help reduce bias in decision making. Humans are human, so we can make decision mistakes and have our own ingrained biases that might impact how we make a decision. And AI assistants, there's some research that's been showing how we can use those to overcome them. I will note, though, that there's also a lot of research on AI that has not been trained correctly can actually create biases of their own and actually perpetuate biases that are in the underlying data. So I don't want to say that AI doesn't potentially also introduce biases, but there is some interesting research on using it to reduce bias. It can be used to suggest course of action for employees. It's particularly useful for decision tasks where humans have a higher level of uncertainty. So it can help the human kind of, for example, like in forecasting type tasks. And in many tasks, there are synergies that can be played with each other. And I think most of the people in this kind of a research stream agree that the idea of AI delegation isn't the idea that let's just give everything to the AI to do for us. It's really that if we have AIs work together, if we have human and AI together, oftentimes we can do a much better job than if we have just human or just AI alone doing this. And so I think this idea of these kind of AI co-pilots or AI robo-colleagues is really kind of where we're going to see things move over the next several years. Now, there's some interesting underlying questions to ask about this from a kind of philosophical labor force type of question. And this really kind of hit me when I was talking with one of our executive education clients about some thoughts that they had about using AI. And I can't divulge the client, but there was discussion about this client oftentimes has to hire a lot of people at certain times of the year. And one of the limitations is that there's not enough skilled labor for those people to come on board to be able to do the job they need. And they see AI as potentially a way to have a way to hire less skilled labor, and the AI acts as like an add-on for that less skilled labor to make them be able to do a higher skilled job. So they've got like kind of a crutch. The AI provides the ability for them to do a higher level job. And that sounds really cool from a business standpoint. I can hire less skilled labor, pay them less. but it also has maybe negative implications for society that, you know, in general, if AI becomes this aid that allows me to hire less skilled labor, does that push down the need for skilled labor in the workforce and thus salaries and all those types of things? So there's an interesting kind of discussion to have here, which is, you know, is AI going to de-skill the workforce, or is AI going to uplift everything? And there's a really big debate going on about this now. A lot of people think that AI is actually going to uplift everything instead of AI replacing people and people losing jobs or having to have less skilled workers. There's just going to be an expectation that everybody becomes that much more productive and everybody will start using these assistants. And so the whole market, the whole economy will just become that much more productive because we're all using AI to make us better. Rather than using AI just to do the same old stuff, we're all going to do much more with it. And I like to think of that kind of view as, I think, a more optimistic view of how things will be used. Now, last thing here before I talk about our specific study, and my study is not very long, so we'll just talk for about 10, 15 minutes on it, and then we can open up to questions. But this is some predictions from Gartner from this year as well. They have a really great, I think these slides will be shared. Nicola and Tammy can share these, but you can get the links from the slides. But they have a great site that has a whole bunch of stuff on generative AI. This primarily, a lot of these predictions have to do with using AI to develop software and tools and products. But this one here, I think, is really interesting. This one, 2026, they predict that over 100 million humans will engage robo-colleagues to contribute to their work. So this is not a prediction of a cottage industry of using generative AI to help out. This is a prediction that generative AI tools will become a commonplace thing in industry for most people to use them to help them do their daily tasks. And I think, you know, this may be a little, you know, aggressive, but I do think that, you know, 5 years from now, we'll be looking back and saying, you know, how did we ever, just like we did with the internet, how did we ever survive without the internet? How did we ever survive without our little AI assistants helping us do things? All right. So let's talk about algorithm aversion and AI aversion specific to this study. Now, this whole wave of working with AI is coming. There's nothing we can do to stop it, I don't think, and I don't know if we want to stop it. But there has been a bunch of research that has shown that traditionally, historically, people have been fairly resistant to using assistance from AI or algorithmic driven tools such as AI machine learning decision aids if they're given the choice. People tend to prefer doing things on their own, using their own expertise, or have human assistance to solve a problem or to complete a task than to having AI assistance, even when the AI and machine learning tools perform better than humans. And I think Nicola mentioned she had an experience recently. If you don't mind, Nicola, I'll share that experience. I think a lot of us have had this. You might be working on a tool, you get suggested something from the tool. Do you want to have us auto-complete this, or do you want to have us, you know, our AI help you finish this? And you say, no, I got it. I'm going to do this myself. That's a simple example of algorithm aversion. Even though that tool may have done a better job than you would have done, there's a little bit of resistance to do this. And there's some things that kind of impact whether or not people are averse to using this type of assistance. It's decision control. You know, how much do I want to have control over the decision? The less control I want to have, maybe the more willing I am to delegate. Imperfection. You know, the more open I am to things not being perfect, I might be more willing to delegate. But if things need to be perfect and my name's going on it, I might want to really have a lot more control and be less willing to delegate. Transparency, you know, there needs to be transparency in how the task was performed. Subjectivity, culture, age, domain knowledge, these are all things that can influence whether or not someone's willing to delegate. But because of this increase in AI decision aids and this increase in co-pilots and all these things that we clearly can see will help people be more productive, we need to really understand how to overcome this algorithm aversion. And how to think about ways to motivate employees to do that. So there's some key papers on this. I'm happy, if you're interested in academic papers, just reach out. I'm happy to share the specific citations for these papers. Now, my co-author and I, you know, are well versed in this algorithm aversion idea, and we also I do a lot of research on behavioral economics. Traditionally, I look at how technology impacts human decision making and the role of things like behavioral economics in that process. And I'm very well familiar with this idea of what's called prospect theory, which is a Nobel Prize winning economics theory from Kahneman and Tversky from the late 70s. And this theory has provided a huge underlying theoretical groundwork for many different things we think of now. Behavioral economics has become kind of a commonplace thing in marketing and organizational theory and economic theory, but it wasn't always that way. And kind of the start of this was this idea of prospect theory and loss aversion. And what loss aversion says is that losses are significantly more powerful than gains. People prefer avoiding losses to acquiring equivalent gains. In other words, if you took $100 away from me, that hurts me more in terms of like my value, how much I feel it, than if you gave me $100 in a positive way. So that the offset is not equal. They don't offset each other. And so feeling losses is really a strong thing for humans. And this is that prospect theory curve. If you're familiar with that at all, you may have seen this before. And things like risk aversion, the endowment effect, status quo bias, these are all things you've probably heard of in business and marketing contexts. Those things, a lot of those are based off of this idea of loss aversion. And there's been an increasing focus on using loss aversion or in a way to frame things for employees, to motivate employees in organizational contexts. So, we tend to think let's reward people by giving them more for doing a better job, and that can be very effective. But there's growing research that says if you kind of frame it differently, the outcome is the same, the economics are the same, but instead of framing it as you gain, you frame it as you lose for underperforming, then that tends to have a bigger impact on people's performance and how they feel about things. Now, I'm going to step aside here and say, from an ethical standpoint, we can have a whole nother discussion on whether or not loss framing is a nice thing to do. And I fully am aware of that conversation. But we're going to focus on loss framing as a way to potentially mitigate some of these AI aversion issues. But I'm fully aware that we should also, simultaneously talk about, is it nice to use loss aversioning? Okay, so our general theory here is that people are going to care more about losses than their aversion to AI. So loss aversion is a stronger force than AI aversion. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an experiment where we're going to ask people to use AI assistance and human assistance, and we're going to see if how we frame their payout for participating in this task as a loss or a gain will actually impact whether or not they prefer to use humans or AI assistance in the task. So here's the study. It's a simple kind of controlled A/B type test where participants are going to be given a task where we're going to give them an image, and they have to tag it with appropriate keywords based on what's in the image. And we're going to give them a list of keywords to choose from. Now, these keywords, there's a right answer of which ones are the best for describing that image. And I'll talk about how we determine that in a bit. And they're given the opportunity to delegate this task. They can try to do it themselves, or they can say, I don't know about this one, and I can delegate it. And they can either delegate it to a human or they can delegate it to an AI. Some people are going to be, in our first study, are going to be given the AI option. Some people are going to be given the human option. And what we're looking at is how many times they delegate, how many times are they willing to use help. We'll change a few things in this as well. We're going to have some different levels of how good these assistants are. They go through a training process and they get to learn how good their assistants are. So there's a human assistant and an AI assistant. In some cases, the human and the AI are just kind of, they're just no better than flipping a coin. They're not really that going to help you that much. In some cases, they're right 3/4 of the time. Some cases, they're right most of the time. So we're going to ask them to do a task. They get to choose to delegate, or they can just do it on their own. We're going to pay them for each one of these tasks they get correct. But the main difference, what we do is we frame it. In one case, they start with 0, and every time they do something right, they get a payment, and so they keep gaining and gaining for each one they get right. That's our first study. In the second study, we do the same thing, but we start with an endowment, and then we take away for each one they get wrong. So the economics and the incentives are exactly the same. They can earn exactly the same amount of money. They're being given an amount at the end based on how many they get correct. But it's just whether or not it's framed as you're going up every time you get one right, or you're going down every time you get one wrong. So let's look at how this worked. So just quickly, this is an example. They're going to get an image like this, and they have to pick some of the tags that make the most sense. The way we figured out what tags to use is we actually used an AI tool called Cloud Vision Cloud Vision API from Google, where it has a well-trained image classification tool. You give it an image and it generates what the best tags are for it. So we use this as kind of our set of tags for them to choose from. All right, so here's our first study. Incentives framed as gains. So gain framing is they earn 10 cents for each image they correctly classify. They're going to go through and do this like 40 or 50 times. They train first. They go through like 20, 30 of these first just to see how it works. And that's also how they learn how good their assistant is. And so we randomly assign them whether or not they're going to be with human assistant or an AI assistant. We randomly assign that assistant's quality. So the human can be 55%, 75%, or 90%. The AI could be any of these. So each person in the study is randomly given either human or AI and randomly one of these levels of accuracy from their assistant. Here's what's interesting is in this gain situation, we see algorithm version very clearly. There is a clear preference for human delegation in the low and the high conditions. So when the assistants aren't very good, we see a strong preference for using humans. And when the assistants are really good, we see a strong preference for using humans as their helpers. So outperforming or very commonly using human delegation over AI. Interestingly, in this kind of middle case, they're about even, which we have to go back and kind of look at the data and get an idea why that AI aversion isn't really happening here in this middle case. But we see strong evidence in the high and the low, which is what we expected. Now, what's interesting though is if we reframe it, so we're going to do the exact same study. They're going to go through and they're going to get an image. They're going to have to pick a list of they're going to have to pick a list of keywords that best match that image, just like they did before. Everything is exactly the same, randomly assigned to human AI or how good the AI is or the human is in terms of their performance. The difference now is instead of saying you start with 0 and you can earn up to $5 in 10-cent increments, we say you start at $5 and you lose 10 cents for each one you get wrong. So at the end, the payment is exactly the same. It's based on how many you get right. The only difference is I'm framing this as a loss. So the economics are the same. It's just framed as a loss. Interesting. Look what happens here. There is no longer any preference for humans. It goes away completely. And in the high range, it actually switches, although this is not a significantly different difference. So we can't really say it's higher. It's really, they're not different from a statistical standpoint, but it completely removes all of the AI algorithmic aversion just because we framed it as a loss. And our underlying theory here is that, it's really simple, is that people care more about losing than they do about whether or not they have to work with an AI. So when you frame it as, hey, I might actually lose something here, that hurts me more than when I'm thinking about gaining something. And so I'm gonna use whatever tool is best to help me out. So I'm more willing to use the AI tool to help me than I would previously. Now we did one final study where we took these two options, the AI and the human experts, and we put them together. So now the study, in the last study, head to head, participants were given both assistants. So they could choose AI or they could choose human in order to delegate to. They couldn't choose both. They could either not delegate, they could just pick the answer on their own, or they could pick human or AI. And so they had both options. They were randomly assigned gain or loss framing. So in this case, instead of two separate studies, they got both tools and they were randomly either put in a group where they saw it as gains or they saw it as losses. And then we also randomly assigned the accuracy of the assistants within the study. So for example, we had 55 to 90% randomly. It was that they could be randomly picked any accuracy level. And so in some instances, they might have a really good AI and a really bad human. They might have them about the same. We wanted to have this be kind of a setting where there's a lot of different variation going on. 350 participants. And in this case here, this is the preference for human delegation versus AI delegation. I think this really tells the whole story. They're even given the opportunity to choose between the two assistants. In the case where it's framed like a gain, huge preference for selecting human help, almost double the amount of times compared to using AI, right? So people on average use human help twice as often as they used AI help when they were in this gain framing. When we put it in the loss framing, identical. Basically, I mean, there is a slight increase here, but these are not statistically different. These are average a number of delegations per participant. So, on average, the statistical difference is probably zero, but goes away. So if I just simply say, you're going to lose money each time you get one wrong, instead of you're going to win money for each one you get right, completely eliminates our loss aversion. Now, this kind of tells a story here. This is a little bit of an eye chart. I apologize, but I think it's very useful to see. This is the number of delegations right here, the number of observations above how many people we had in each one of these groups in this third study. And this is the number of delegations that on average for each one of these. So in this is what's showing up here is how different the AIs and the humans are in terms of their levels of accuracy. So human accuracy greater than AI. So this means that the AI is about 15% worse than the human, 10% worse, 5% worse. They're the same. And then here we've got AI better. So AI is 5% better, 10% better, 15% better. So take a look at, these are the ones in yellow are the ones to pay attention to. This is the number of delegations to AI versus human. And we see that in this case of gains, human is always higher than AI, right? So we're always delegating more to the human, even when the human is 15% less accurate than the AI, underperforming by AI by 15%. Now, if we go to losses, if you compare those same numbers, it becomes rational. All of a sudden, immediately becomes rational. The human who is making the decision is using whichever one is better, right? So in the case where the humans are better, we're using the humans a lot more. We're using the human expert a lot more to help us out. In the cases when they're the same, we're using them about equally. And in the case when the AI is better, we are using the AI much more frequently. And even the magnitude follows the level of the difference between the human and the AI accuracy. So when the human is way better than the AI, that's the highest amount of human delegation. When the AI is way better than human, we see the highest level of delegation to the AI. So this really tells the story, which I think is really interesting, is that framing it as a loss all of a sudden makes people rational, and they don't care if it's a human or an AI expert helping them. They just care which one's going to give them the best chance of not losing, right? So this is our general result. Now, so implications and next step, people are willing to sacrifice performance benefits to avoid AI. That's what AI aversion or algorithm aversion is all about. And in our study, we estimate that AI must outperform a human by more than 10% in traditional incentive schemes before people are willing to use AI help over a human's help, or their own, we can also think of this as their own human expertise. There's an innate desire to avoid loss, though, that dominates aversion toward AI. So just this idea of being scared of losses as humans is very powerful and can overcome this issue. So there's significant promise here for neutralizing algorithm aversion. And what I love about this is it's super simple. All I'm doing is just changing the framing of the task that I'm giving the person to do. Now, fully have to have a conversation in an organizational context about how this might impact workers' feelings and workers' kind of acceptance of task when you start doing loss framing, because loss frame contracts can be, something that, cognitively can cause some problems. So we have to think about that. And just so you know, right now I'm running experiments with in our lab here with Joseph, and we are now expanding we have this paper under review, and we have to do some additional follow-up experiments. So we're doing higher payouts. So I think they could get paid up to $5 in the last version. Some of the pushback was, well, is that enough to really matter? So now we're doing up to $10 and to see how that works. And then we're also trying another task. Instead of just this image tagging, we're asking them to do a forecasting task where they have to make a prediction about how well someone is going to perform given a bunch of historical data, which is another very common kind of decision task. Like, for example, in admissions here, we have to decide whether or not we should admit someone into the program based on historical data. There's, in hiring, et cetera. So that's where we currently are. So I'm gonna wrap it up there and open it up for questions for the last 15, 20 minutes or so.
Thanks, Jesse. This is fascinating, and the chat's been exploding. One thing that Larry just asked was if it was $1,000 versus $5, would the outcomes change? I think my team would be in the lab.
Yeah. Yes. So
I'd be in
Larry,
the lab.
I don't know you personally, but if you and your company would like to sponsor that experiment to let me pay 500 people $1,000 a piece, I will be happy to do that. But that is that is definitely a question. And I see a question above that. Yes, we actually did pay them real money. So this is we run it here in the lab with students. We The first incentive is that they show up, they get some course credit for showing up, but we pay them real money. So I'm a behavioral economist, and I do a lot of experimental economics methods, and I'm a big believer in real incentives. So we did actually pay these people, so they were being paid for their performance. And I would love to do much larger amounts, but we have budget limitations. So for example, doing this simple study with, I think we did, over the course of it, about 800 students, $5 a piece is a $4,000 grant we have to get just to pay. So if anybody's interested in sponsoring research, please reach out to me. But that is a question and Larry, and a limitation in a lot of economics and business research.
So we have lots of questions, Jesse. Lewis asks, what are AI implications in the world of leadership, coaching, and mental health fields? And do you think AI will become sentient?
Sentient. Right. Well, that last one has been debated for a long time, and I don't want to. I am not going to risk. Well, I mean, no matter what I say, I'm probably going to be wrong about AI becoming sentient. But I will note this, that there's a term that you may hear around called AGI, which stands for artificial general intelligence. So most of the AI tools we have are very context specific. They can do one type of task really well. That changed, for example, like predict whether or not someone's going to buy a house, or sorry, how much someone's going to buy a house for, or predict whether or not this is a picture of a cat or dog, those types of things. That changed a lot in the last year with ChatGPT and and all the stuff driven by GPT and these large language models, where you have these tools now that can do several things well, right? They can translate, they can take documents, and they can summarize them, they can write code, etc. So we are moving towards this AGI, artificial general intelligence, where the idea is that you have one AI that can do all the tasks that a human could do in terms of cognitive tasks. I think we're still very far away from that. Now, even if you have a tool that can do all that and is artificial general intelligence, there's an argument on whether or not that is sentient or not. And so, I think, so really it's very dependent on what your definitions are that you're talking about. And so I think, and then there's consciousness. And so what is consciousness the same as intelligence, the same as sentience? It's a very philosophical debate. But do I think we'll get to a point where we have an artificial general intelligence? Probably. I don't know how long that will take, but I think I think most people think that we will get there at some point. And that's when things will get really interesting. Just so you know, Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, who created GPT and ChatGPT, that's his life goal, is to create the first artificial general intelligence. So it's not like this isn't something that's being actively worked on. So I don't know if that answers the question about sentience or not. Kind of punted. But with your question about leadership and mental health, yes, there are already several startups that are working in the space of creating kind of AI focused. I don't want to go as far as say therapists, because they're not therapists, but they're basically chatbots that you can talk to that can help you if you can't get to a human therapist or something. So there's a lot of startups that are looking at how to use AI to kind of help with that interaction and conversation with people that may need someone to talk to. And I mean, there's 1,000 sci-fi movies and books where in the future people have AI significant others, and those types of things. And I'm sure that stuff will be coming. In terms of leadership and coaching, yes, I think that's a just like we might have an assistant to help me decide what stocks to invest in. That's a prime area for developing tools that could support leadership and development in people. So AI driven coaches that give you feedback on things. And large language models that we think of today are largely driven by text, trained on text. You input text, you get text out or images out. but there's a lot of work on using other things for training, such as video and audio, and building similar type architectures on top of that. So I can imagine a world where you upload a video of yourself giving a presentation or giving a motivational speech, and you've got a tool that gives you feedback and talks you through maybe what you could do differently. I think that's, I don't want to say low hanging fruit, but that is, I would be surprised if there's not somebody in Silicon Valley working on a startup that's doing something like that. Yeah.
Jesse, that
Yes.
also relates
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
the next question, which is, do you foresee AI taking over HR tasks? And what do you
Yeah.
see
So,
as risk?
yeah. Yeah. So, yes and no. So HR tasks, so one thing to say, just a general answer, will AI take over X? The answer is probably yes, but takeover is where I want to be careful, because I don't think it's going to replace all the humans involved, but they will be lots of applications of these things in all sorts of across all areas of business. HR, many companies have already moved to, even before ChatGPT had moved to, kind of self-service chatbots to help their employees answer questions about their benefits or other things. And with ChatGPT and similar type large language models, we're seeing that become more pervasive. That a lot of self-service type stuff. There's been a discussion for years about how you use AI and machine learning and predictive modeling for hiring, to to screen resumes and identify candidates. Almost every company that I've talked to that had tried to do that has stopped because of innate bias in their models, and it resulted in just not the sample of people in terms of diversity that they want to hire. And so most companies have kind of stopped using that kind of straightforward approach of just using a model where you plug in a bunch of resumes and it says, interview these people. But there are those tools that are still out there. But I think what we'll see is more AI assistance, like, hey, what do I'm thinking about hiring this person. I need some additional insight or some additional input from an AI tool that will help me make that decision. So like decision aids instead of pure just kind of filters. So do you think we'll see AI in admissions?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll just say yes. I don't know if we can say how it's being used or how it's really being used right now. But yes, I mean, there are already tools out there for us for screening applicants to get us to help us make decisions and things like that. I actually oversee our graduate admissions. I know we have a tool that helps us a little bit in finding places to target and to help us kind of make decisions about scholarships and things like that. But we're not using any tools to say, should we admit this person, or to figure out what the list is. That is all still very hands-on and very human driven. But I think we will see AI tools. I mean, I think the big takeaway from this in general, just generally, is that these tools are going to add a lot of value and create a lot of opportunity to get more efficient and more productive. But the human in the loop is still very important, very key. I think if your goal is to, how do I replace a bunch of employees and just put an AI in place, I don't think we're there yet. I think that's still pretty far off. You're still going to want to have an AI in place, but maybe, and I'm sorry to the lawyers out there, but for this example, but you might not need as many lawyers to write up contracts and evaluate documents. You might need half as many because you have an AI tool that can do a lot of the grunt work first, and then you still have, for example, and I'm just giving this as an example, lawyers to go through and do the final kind of reads and make sure everything's all right. For example, like I've heard people talking about using AI to create compliance documents that have to be submitted to governing agencies for whatever industry they're in, and I would highly recommend against just using an AI tool to do that. You might use it to help you synthesize data and information in order to create your initial report, but you want a human in the loop for everything, because this is very, especially those types of situations. So yeah.
Couple of very quick last questions, Jesse.
Sure.
So many of them. One is, and these are related. Can you say something about what are the best AI systems for review legal contracts and confidentiality agreements? And then there's another question around what are the best tools that business executives could be using?
Yeah, so good question. So the legal ones, I apologize. I don't have deep expertise in that space on the existing ones. There was one of the leading companies was something called Law Geeks a couple of years ago, but I'm sure it's moved beyond that now. So I apologize that I don't have a specific recommendation for legal. But there are a lot of companies that are what they're using. So just briefly, you can think of these tools like ChatGPT, Lambda from Google, Llama from Facebook. These are kind of foundational models that are really good at language processing that companies will take and then fine tune and build on top of them to make them really good at a specific task. And I think a lot of these tools for especially document analysis, that's what the kind of the strategy is let's take something like GPT-4 or Lambda and then train it in order to do better at it's called fine tuning, but you give it some more data and make it better at a specific task. So I think that's what most of those tools are. In terms of the tools for executives, I can interpret this two ways. There's tools that the executives could use specifically for themselves, right? Like, so for example, like ChatGPT is a great tool to be able to just use it as an assistant, like a personal assistant to help you draft memos, to help you kind of summarize large amounts of documents you might need to read and things like that. There's also one called Claude, which is really interesting. Claude is supposed to be like the moral version of ChatGPT. Not that there's anything wrong with ChatGPT, but their whole motto and mission is that it's trained in a way that it's got really tight guardrails on and doesn't, and is supposed to be very, very well constrained in terms of what it can do. Not in terms of features, but in terms of like the types of responses and things like that. But then the other way I can interpret that as an executive, you might want to think about what types of tools you might want to think about your company using for projects and things like that. And I would just say that there are a lot of options out there, and there's kind of two or three different modes where people are engaging with AI. And I think we're talking mostly large language models right now. Large language models. There are commercial APIs, right? So there are these foundational models like GPT-4 and Lambda that are being sold as something that you can plug into and use. And there's different approaches. You can use them out the box for whatever, or you can train them and fine tune them for specific contexts. And there's lots of consulting companies that will come help you do that. But the idea is that there's this existing model out there, and you're going to pay for the use of it and have some sort of service level agreement with Google or Microsoft to incorporate that model in a product or in a service you're going to use in your company. The other kind of common mode is that there are open access models that are out there. So for example, Llama from Facebook, they have a commercial version now, but their initial model was kind of an open access one, and they have a new commercial version. And basically, as long as you don't directly compete with Facebook, you can use this as like an open source type model. And there are a lot of these for different. They're large language models, but there are a lot of models that are context specific, like image recognition and object detection, all sorts of things. And so if you have a good IT group, I would say go out and play with some of these open source, open access models. And but then you have to think about how you're going to host the model, how you're going to deploy the model, and all those types of things. But a lot of companies are doing that instead of using these commercial partnerships and SLAs with Google and OpenAI. They're taking existing open source models and then fine tuning them and making them work in their own production environment. A great resource if you're technically inclined and want to go play with some models, there's a website called Hugging Face, and that, I know it's a weird name, but it's basically the main repository for all the models that are out there that are open access models. So you can go and play with them, and then you can download them. You can load them into like a Google Colab notebook, or download them locally if you want to use them locally. One thing to note though is that these models tend to be big, billions of parameters big. So you have to have an idea of kind of what type of hardware and what type of technology services you have. A lot of them will run on like a PC, but some of them you have to have a GPU. Some of them you might have to have multiple GPUs. So you just want to kind of think about, what type of technology architecture you might need. So if you're on the strategy executive side, it might be a fun project to have, one of your IT people go play around with and explore. So. All right, I think we're at time, and I'm sorry. There's a lot of questions.
Tammy's got a few things to say.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse. A very insightful study. As Gary put in the chat, a bit exciting and scary at the same time. So a lot of good information.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So just an update on upcoming Business Over Breakfast webinars on October the 19th, the Leadership Lab. We're going to have Jamie Turner join us to talk about guiding the next generation of workplace stars. And on November the 2nd, Anadi Baradwa is going to talk about leveraging ChatGPT to derive value for your business. So this is going to build on a lot of the information that Jesse shared with us today. And then on November the 16th, unlocking the magic of TikTok with Marina Cooley. So those are some upcoming Business Over Breakfast webinars, and we hope that you can join us for those. But we also have some short courses that we would love to see you participate in. And if you got a lot of the session today with Jesse, please join us for the upcoming AI and Machine Learning for Business course. This course will provide you fundamental understanding of AI and how it can be leveraged to effectively create value in your organization. As Nicola mentioned, this course is taking place in person or online, October the 23rd and 24th. Disrupting Your Business Strategy will be offered in person or online November the 8th, 9th. Finance and Accounting will be in person on November the 8th and 9th. We also have Leading and Inspiring Change on November the 14th, 15th. And then beginning in December, Design Thinking. This will also have some AI components within it as well. This will take place on December the 4th as well as the 5th. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to join us. And we hope you have a great rest of the week. Take care. Bye-bye.